This video done. So what's up guys, no, it's not really itchy nose. Well, I'll do a video today talking about the tragic incident that happened at Colchester Zoo last week. So some of you guys may have heard about this. There was an incident at Colchester Zoo last week around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. A zebra was killed by a rhino. The rhino and the zebras were kind of in like a mixed enclosure, like a shared enclosure. And something unfortunately went wrong. When I first heard, obviously, they didn't release like the detail. They didn't kind of reveal what had happened until, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I just assumed when I heard this, I just assumed it was at Hayes where the rhino and the zebra had gotten into a fight, or maybe the rhino had snapped and just for some reason had attacked the zebra. But we now know exactly what happened. They confirmed that what happened was the female rhino was having a fight with its baby, and it basically tried to push the male zebra Ziggy out of the way. And unfortunately impaled his stomach with her horn. Basically, in so many words, the zebra was disemboweled by the rhino. It sustained quite serious injuries and unfortunately died not long after sustaining those injuries from the rhino basically punching its stomach. Obviously I feel for, the zookeepers and everything that, that obviously would have had to deal with that incident. I think, as obviously it's not yet kind of been a full week since the accident happened, so I imagine that things are still very raw for them. Like, I guess the zookeepers are still probably trying to come to terms with everything everything that's obviously happened overall, within this last week, trying to, continue on and, continue life as usual, despite the tragic events of what happened last week, in which a zebra lost its life, in what was quite described as being quite a rare incident, in that being an incident that very rarely happens, and unfortunately, on Friday it did happen. I'm thinking, is it really wise to have rhino sharing an enclosure with another animal just because of the risk of that, like something like that happening? Obviously, we know it wasn't intentional and that she was just trying to move the zebra out of the way. But maybe not the smartest idea. Obviously, I do feel also for the people that, the people that were at the zoo, obviously visiting the zoo on Friday. Because obviously the zoo would have been open to the public as usual around that time, and obviously people would have been in the area at the time and would have seen that incident happen, and it's probably it left a lot of people who saw that quite shaken up. My fear is that kids saw that happen. I fear that there would have been kids that saw that happen, and that would have obviously been quite scary and quite distressing for them, to have to see something like that happen. Obviously it was a horrible incident and a horrible tragedy, which probably has hit a lot of the people, a lot of the staff and the zookeepers at Colchester Zoo very hard. And I think, you have to applaud them for the fact that they acted very professionally despite the difficult circumstances of what happened. Obviously this is a very awful incident, obviously, and it probably wasn't the easiest situation to deal with, a situation where an animal had been seriously injured. I can't imagine how hard and how painful it must be to see an animal in so much pain and so much distress and know that there's nothing you can do to help that animal, there's nothing you can do for that animal's injuries are too severe, and they're not going to survive. It must be horrible for the people that have to deal with that, and I can't imagine how those, the zookeepers and everything must be feeling, everyone must be feeling, today, obviously, and it's probably still very painful for them to think about. It's probably still very raw for them, being an incident that only happened, literally less than a week ago now. It's just like you think about it, right? You never think, people never think to themselves, oh, I'm gonna go to the zoo today and see a zebra get disemboweled by a rhino. You never think you're gonna go to the zoo and see something like that happen. And I mean, you don't see that at many zoos where rhinos and zebras are in the same enclosure. So I'm not entirely sure what Colchester Zoo's reasoning for that was, but maybe they thought it would be a good idea. And I think, at least we know that attack incidents like that are very rare, very rare. I guess you could describe it as an incident where the female rhino was, was fighting with her baby, and the male zebra, Siggy, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It probably was also a very distressing incident for the other animals as well, who obviously saw that happen. Obviously, the other animals that were in the enclosure at the time that saw that happen. Obviously, the other zebras probably would have been quite distressed and quite scared and frightened by what had happened. Probably the other rhinos were quite distressed by that as well, and quite shocked by it, quite scared, frightened by what happened. It's obviously a very sad incident to have happened, and I do feel for everyone at Colchester Zoo, or who works at Colchester Zoo, who has been affected by this incident, and also to the people that were there visiting the zoo on Friday who might have seen that happen. And as I said, it's sad to think that there are kids that might have seen that happen, that may have had to, unfortunately, had to witness that. Obviously, it's something that no child should ever have to witness, and I can imagine that, a child witnessing something like that, it would be very kind of traumatizing for them. It would be very distressing. It would be very sad, scary. It'd be like a very sad, scary thing to see. Obviously, it's hard to say, well, whether, this could have been prevented or whatever, because it probably couldn't have been, because obviously there was no way of knowing that was going to happen. There was no way of knowing that something like, that was going to happen. There was nothing that they could have done. The zookeepers didn't, it wasn't like the zookeepers knew that was going to happen, or knew that was, that would be a positive, that there was a possibility of something like that, happening. But maybe you have to kind of think that it probably wasn't a good idea for zebras to be sharing an enclosure with rhinos because of that happening. Maybe it's a good idea to keep them separated following this incident. I don't know, but obviously it's not really something you ever really see at many zoos. Obviously London Zoo doesn't have rhinos. I'm assuming Whipsnade Zoo does, but I'm assuming it's a situation at Whipsnade where they actually keep the zebras and rhinos separate if they have rhinos there. But I know that they don't have rhinos at London Zoo, but they do have zebras there. But I'm sure even if they had rhinos at London Zoo, they wouldn't have rhinos in the same enclosure as zebras, will stop, because of, the risk of something like that happening. I'm not trying to blame the zookeepers for the fact that this happened. I'm not saying it's their fault that this incident happened, and I'm not saying, but I'm just saying it maybe wasn't a good idea to have rhinos and zebras in the same enclosure. But, obviously, I don't think there'll really be any investigation into this, because there doesn't need to be, because it was just a tragic accident. That's what it was. It was nothing more than a tragic accident in which an animal sadly lost its life, in what would obviously have been quite a sad and quite distressing incident for all involved. Obviously the zookeepers, for the other animals, for the people that obviously that were there. And I do feel so sorry for those people that were visiting the zoo on Friday. They would never have expected to be witnessing something like that, and unfortunately they have had to witness that, and it probably would have been quite sad for them, and they probably would have been quite distressed. They went for what was supposed to be a nice day out, and instead it was a day that turned into absolute horror, because they've just had to witness something like that. I can't imagine how those people must have been feeling when they left the zoo on Friday afternoon. They must have been shell-shocked. We've actually been, me and my sister actually, we've been to London Zoo Colchester Zoo where this happened. And obviously we came out. It was like I think it was like the October half term, and we had to wait. We had to go. We missed one. We thought we'd missed the bus, but we were on the wrong side of the road. So we had to cross over the other side of the road, and we had to wait for like an hour for the bus. Just letting it out. He was letting himself shut in here for some reason. I don't know how he does it, but he was doing it. But yeah, as I was saying, I mean, obviously, so we were still on the other side of the road waiting for the bus for about an hour. It was dark. There weren't that many lights there. It was like a country road that Colchester Zoo's on. There weren't that many lights there. There was like a load of wood. It was like woodland on the opposite side of the road, and obviously it was like surrounded by just trees. You know, we were hoping that the bus wasn't going to be that long, but it ended up being longer than we thought it was going to be. You know, obviously me and my sister were getting fed up. We were tired, we were cold, we were hungry. We hadn't had anything to eat since lunchtime. So we were a little bit hot, so we were hungry. The temperatures had dropped by that point. Obviously it was cold. It was dark, obviously. As I said, there weren't that many street lights along that road. Obviously it's a country road, and there wasn't that many street lights along that road. It was just awful, it really was. But I mean, obviously, it's not so bad if you have it hot, as at least you're not waiting for the buses. I mean, the buses out that way, they're not as regular as buses here in London. Let's just put it that way. I mean, obviously, I can't imagine how distressing this incident must have been for the zookeepers that were there. Obviously, working there on Friday, they would have had to deal with that. Like, I can't imagine. As I said, I can't imagine how it feels to see, an animal in pain and in distress, and to not be able to do anything for that animal. It would probably break my heart having to see an animal in distress and in pain like that, with such severe injuries. Knowing that I couldn't do anything to save it would probably break my heart to bits. And I think that I can imagine this has left them in shock. This has probably left them feeling really sad. But obviously, it's a case of life goes on. Obviously, the zoo would have reopened as usual on Saturday. Obviously, there would have been people who went to the zoo on Saturday who probably would have been blissfully unaware of the events that had occurred the previous day. People probably wouldn't have seen the news, so they wouldn't have seen the news that this incident had happened. They would have been blissfully unaware that the previous day a zebra unfortunately lost its life, unfortunately died, after being injured in an incident involving a rhino. It probably would have been quite distressing for the zookeepers to open to open the zoo the previous day. To open the zoo the following, the next day, to continue on as normal. It must be so hard to have to try and continue on as normal and continue on as usual when something like that in these circumstances where something like that has happened. It must be very hard for the zookeepers to continue working, as usual after something like that happens. I mean, obviously, I don't think any of them should feel guilty in any way about what happened, because it wasn't their fault. It wasn't it wasn't as if they knew it was going to happen and didn't do anything to prevent it. It was a case of them not knowing that something like that was going to happen, and it was a case when it was a situation nobody knew was going to happen. It was. I mean, obviously, it was a tragic incident, and it's very sad, what happened. But nobody should feel guilty about what happened, because nobody was at fault for what happened. Nobody was to blame for what happened. It was just nothing more than an extremely tragic accident. And I do want to say, as I said, I do want to send my thoughts out to everyone involved in this incident, the zookeepers who would have had to deal with that, the people that were visiting the park on Friday who would have witnessed that, to any of the kids that that may have potentially witnessed that. To I hope that the other animals are doing well, and I hope they've not been too affected by what happened. I hope that they're okay. Because that probably would have been deeply traumatizing for them, quite frightening for them. And I hope that this hasn't had too much of a negative effect on them as well. So yeah, I thought I would do a little video giving my thoughts on that, and to kind of send my thoughts out to those affected by what happened at Colchester Zoo last week. Awful, terrible thing to have happened, really. There's no positive thing to say about it, is there? There's nothing good or positive to say about something like this. When something like this happens, it's like, it's just awful for everyone involved. And for all those people that were there, are there visiting the zoo on Friday, they may have witnessed that. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video anyway, and yeah, have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you later. Bye bye.